There are many signs in all this for those who understand and use their common sense. Surah Ar-Ra'd, verse 4. As with the world of plants, Muslims did extensive research in the animal kingdom as well. Treatises were written in Persian, Turkish, and Arabic. Animals of all types were studied for a variety of reasons: to practice veterinary medicine, for breeding purposes, and for exploratory research. Abu Ali ibn Sina, a famous Muslim scholar of the 11th century, went so far as to write on aspects of animal psychology. This, while people in medieval Europe thought that bees were born from the stomachs of dead cows. Truly, in the cattle there is a lesson for you. We give you to drink from what is inside their bellies, from between excretions and blood, a milk pure and pleasant to drink. Surah An-Nahl, verse 66. The Quran repeatedly refers to the human body. It reminds man to reflect on his own metabolism, which itself conforms to the laws of God. Man's conception, birth, growth, maturity, senility, and death are all described as proof of God's creation. With the help of the Quran, Muslims were able to develop a holistic approach to medicine. The body was thought to have two qualities similar to nature. It was integrated and balanced. Muslim physicians diagnosed a patient in order to return his or her body to its natural, harmonious state. Doctors would look at a patient's physical and psychological condition and then take into account his spiritual well-being. Generally, Muslim physicians considered preventing illnesses to be more important than curing them. They were the first to stress that good health depended on a proper diet, exercise, and hygiene. Universal Medicare was always a feature of the best Muslim governments. In the 10th century, fully equipped mobile hospitals were established to visit remote areas and prisons. Doctors had to be licensed in order to practice medicine. Hospitals would have adjoining medical schools where doctors would teach in the morning and practice in the afternoon. The modern hospital and pharmacy are but two of the many contributions that Muslims have made in medicine. This is another. Steam baths. This is a public steam bath in Istanbul, Turkey. If we were to fully describe all the contributions that Muslims have made in medicine, we'd probably need another program. Here are but a few. Muslim physicians were the first to use anesthesia in surgery. Even before the microscope was invented, they discovered the existence of capillaries. They were the first to describe pulmonary circulation. They were the first to cauterize wounds, the first to discover that depression could cause an ulcer. Muslim physicians founded pediatrics as a separate discipline. They pioneered the use of music in therapy. The most remarkable contribution came from Abu Ali ibn Sina, who wrote the most influential work in the history of medicine. It was called Qanun fi Tib, or the Canon of Medicine. Translated into Latin in the 12th century, Qanun fi Tib was the preeminent medical textbook in Europe for over 500 years.
وَاللَّهُ أَخْرَجَكُم مِّن بُطُونِ أُمَّهَاتِكُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ شَيْئًا.
It is He who brought you forth from the wombs of your mothers when you knew nothing, and He gave you sight and intelligence and affections, that you may give thanks to Allah. Surah An-Nahl, verse 78. Muslims dominated the field of mathematics for most of the Middle Ages and part of the Renaissance. The use of mathematics is directly tied to several important duties in Islam. Math is used to calculate zakah, or the poor due. It's used to determine shares of inheritance and for the Islamic calendar. The contributions of Muslim mathematicians have a direct impact on how each of us uses math today. Long ago, numbers were represented by letters or symbols, which made calculations cumbersome. Muslims discovered a numeral system, which was used by people in ancient India. After making some modifications to this system, Muslims adopted it and later introduced it to the world. The number of angles in each numeral determined its value. efficient numeric system in their hands, Muslims made the science of math flourish. The complex system of inheritance in Islam was simplified when the celebrated scholar Al-Khwarizmi introduced the world to algebra in the 9th century. He also solved the binomial theorem 200 years before Sir Isaac Newton. In Muslim history, there are no less than 34 scholars who guided the development of mathematics for 5 centuries. Alchemy, or alchemia, was the forerunner of chemistry and was developed by Muslims. The foundation for chemistry was laid by the great scientist Al-Razi, who rejected the mystical interpretations of alchemy and divided the newer science of chemistry into a study of organic and inorganic substances. Al-Razi also described some important chemical processes such as distillation, filtration, and calcination. Muslim chemists discovered potassium, nitric acid, alcohol, sulfuric acid, bismuth, and other substances. Many of the instruments invented by Muslims are still found in chemistry labs today.
الله الذي رفع السماوات بغير عمد ترونها.
Allah is He who raised the heavens without any pillars that you can see, and is firmly established on the throne of authority. He has subjected the sun and the moon to His law. Each one runs its course for a term appointed. He regulates all affairs, explaining the signs in detail, that you may believe with certainty in the meeting with your Lord. Surah Al-Ra'd, verse 2. Muslims have long been known for their contributions in astronomy. Astronomical terms like zenith, nadir, and azimuth have come to us from Arabic. The works of Muslim astronomers are so great in number that much of their material has remained untouched despite 200 years of research by Western scholars. Muslims developed the theory of spiral motion and constructed a planetary model that later influenced the works of Copernicus and Galileo. The modern observatory can trace its roots back to the Muslim world, where observatories like this were quite common. Muslims were responsible for discovering a variety of stars and celestial bodies. They developed highly advanced astronomical instruments, the best known of which is the astrolabe. The astrolabe can be considered to be a kind of multi-purpose analog computer. With it, Muslims were able to determine the latitude of stars, to tell time, to measure the heights of mountains, and the depths of wells. Every specialized science in the Muslim world was influenced by the Quran, and even though the Quran is not a book of science, its effect changed the course of learning and the fate of humanity.
All of this information may have come as a bit of surprise, but what's surprising to us is that we have only scratched the surface as far as the contributions of Muslims are concerned. We still have a lot more information, but unfortunately too little time left to share it with you. In fact, there's so much information that we had to leave out entire subject areas like physics, history, optics, psychology, and mineralogy. With the help of the Quran, Muslims were able to do important research in these and other fields as well. If you've been wondering why Muslims have stopped leading the world in science and learning, you don't have to look farther than their original inspiration, the Quran. When Muslims tried their best to follow the commandments of the Quran, they were unequaled as a community. But when Muslims started distancing themselves from its teachings, they also distanced themselves from truth and wisdom. Around the 12th century, Europeans started to translate the works of Muslim scholars. These works came by way of Spain, Italy, Sicily, and were translated into Latin and other languages. These translations became the basis for Europe's Renaissance or rebirth. From the Renaissance, science and technology continued to expand. Today, they're expanding at an amazing pace. Achievements and innovations aren't just measured in days, they're being counted by the hour. But even in the 1980s, we can learn a lesson from the Muslim scholars of the Middle Ages. Muslims have always regarded nature as a trust from God. They saw themselves as being part of the natural world and understood life in terms of its interdependence. Nature was something to be used but not exploited. Muslims believed that the entire universe was made for mankind to use in order to carry out the will of Allah. They felt comfortable with the realization that God is the source of all knowledge and His creation must be respected. We believe that many of our planet's environmental problems could be solved if we use technology with this unified approach. We also believe that the Quran will continue to guide the human race no matter how technically advanced we become. The Quran was revealed over 1400 years ago, but it continues to preempt